Plessy v. Ferguson was a Supreme Court case that upheld constitutionality of racial segregation under the separate but equal doctrine. This court case started in 1896. Plessy v. Ferguson determined that Black Americans could be kept separate from white Americans in public spaces and facilities under the false premise that those facilities were actually equal. This unfortunately made segregation and racist laws legal. At the center of this case was a man named Homer Plessy, a shoemaker born around the time of the Civil War. Homer Plessy lived in New Orleans, Louisiana. Homer Plessy was considered a black man, although technically he only had 1/8 black heritage, so if you saw him on the street, you would think he was white. This is how race began to function in the United States. This is what people referred to as the one-drop rule, the idea of being if you had 1 drop of black blood, then you were considered black. The state of Louisiana at this time was very different from the others in that it was thoroughly multiracial. Black Americans were upset over all of the whites-only public places that they weren't allowed to go in. This gave the Committee of Citizens an idea. This idea was for Plessy to sit down in a whites-only section of a train. Then an officer would detain and charge him. So in 1892, Plessy boarded a whites-only car on the East Louisiana train. When the conductor approached him and asked him about his race, he explained that he was 1/8 black and refused to move to the colored-only section. The officer then removed Plessy from the train and arrested him. This was all according to the Committee of Citizens' plan. The Committee of Citizens took this to the Supreme Court. Plessy's lawyers argued that the Louisiana segregation law violated his 13th and 14th Amendments. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery, and the 14th Amendment gave Black Americans citizenship rights and equal protection. The Supreme Court rejected all of these arguments and claimed the legal question about whether Louisiana law promoted Black American inferiority was irrelevant. The Supreme Court also argued that separate facilities for black and whites was actually okay as long as each race's facilities were equal. Justice Henry Brown agreed with this separate but equal clause. On the other hand, Justice John Marshall was the only Supreme Court judge that did not think the separate but equal clause was morally correct. He argued that the rights in the Constitution applied to everyone. The case was decided 7-1 in favor of Ferguson. The end.